We're going to be in the book of Acts. If you want to turn in your Bibles to Acts chapter 4, around verse 32. Most of the churches in this country are happy to have an increase to their numbers. That's kind of something that everyone shoots for. Bigger numbers means more money, means more projects, means happier feeling people, and everybody's excited to see so many people. But nobody really cares necessarily what's motivating people to come. That doesn't seem to be a big deal in many American churches. It's not about why they come, it's about whether they come or not, and how many of them are willing to show up. So as a result, most churches, I would say, completely lose sight of their purpose and why they're supposed to be coming to a building to gather together as the Lord's church. Do you ever stop to think about how God feels about the work that's being done by maybe a mega church, thousands of people able to throw a bunch of money in and do a bunch of projects? How does God feel about that church's work? Is he happy? Is he satisfied? Is he excited? Even if the thousands of people that go there are doing nothing to really live like Christ, is he still happy? Do the ends justify the means in that case? Maybe that's not the case at every mega church in the country. I certainly hope it's not. But is God really happy with people who are coming together and doing good works and doing good things that God would ask them to do, but they're doing it with the wrong heart and with the wrong motivation? In the first century, we read about a huge group of people coming together to become the very first Christians. The very first church of Christ ever was established in Acts chapter 2. Thousands of people. It says 3,000 were baptized in a single day. And they were gathering together, and what we read about them is that they were extremely devoted. Verse 42 of Acts 2. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers, and all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles, and all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Picture in the first century of the church coming together, the very first time, is that they are completely devoted to God and completely devoted to one another. They had all things in common. They were sharing everything that they had with everyone else. And now we come to a point in Acts chapter 4 where we see that this is continued over weeks or months. Verse 32, it says, "Now the full number of those who believed were of one heart and soul. And no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. With great power, the apostles were giving their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was on them all." Now, this is a grouping of over 5,000 people. And here it says that they, once again, had all things in common. They are sharing with one another. Notice these words. None of them thought that any of the things that belonged to him was his own. Wow. Can you imagine being a part of this mega church? I mean, this is the very first ever mega church. And these thousands of people didn't consider anything that they owned to be their own. Wow. Can you imagine feeling that way? Do you feel that way? Everything that you own is not your own. I don't know that I feel that way. That's my van out there. That's my truck and my house and my camper and my bike and my computers. That's mine. You want it? I might let you borrow it. I might make you sign a little contract. I might, ask you when you'll be returning it. Like, that's just kind of the mindset that's ingrained in us, right? I mean, I imagine most of you feel the same way. Some of you are probably not so much that way. Or we might say, what's mine is yours. You just let me know whenever you have something in need, and secretly hope that you never ask because we really like our stuff. You see, that's not the way these people were. 5,000 plus people who had a lot of stuff, and they said, it's not mine. It belongs to God. It belongs to all of you. It belongs to everyone who is in God's kingdom. What makes them so devoted, so willing to give up everything? This is a mind-blowing statement that they were acting and feeling and thinking like this. They were of one heart, one soul. No one looked at someone else and said, you're not like me. You're not of me. You're not part of me. They said, you are one with me. How does anybody get to that level of connectiveness with 5,000 people? The text tells us that they were listening to the resurrection of Jesus being accounted to them day after day by the apostles. And it says, great grace was upon them all. What do you think about God's grace? How do you feel about God's grace? What does God's grace mean to you? Is this just something that we commonly talk about and we just kind of blow over and pass by and think about on occasion? Or is this something that has had a tremendous impact on you? How gracious has God been toward you in your life? What has He given you? What is He providing for you each and every day? Does the grace of God mean so much to you that you are willing to devote yourself to God's people in this way? He chose to love you, even though you were His enemy, even though you chose to love the world and love all the things that are in the world, even though sometimes now you still do. He chooses to love you. He chose to give His Son to die for you to be saved and to be with Him for all eternity. Not because of something that you did, not because you were so good and so righteous, but because He chose to love you. Does the grace of God have that kind of impact on you? Are you thinking about and dwelling on these things? It reminds me of 1 John chapter 4, verse 10. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. They had great grace was upon them. They were constantly thinking about, feeling, understanding how gracious God has been toward them. That was every waking moment of their life was considered to be a gift to them. The relationship that they now had with God was real to them. It wasn't just something that people talked about. It was something that was experienced, something that was felt. And as a result of that love that they felt from their Creator, they looked at others differently. They looked at their own possessions differently. Their faith was on display for everyone to see. Notice that they weren't just giving a little bit. They didn't get all their bills in and all their payments in, and then they got their income, and then they did the math and everything, and then they said, okay, well, I think that we could comfortably give this much every, now and then. Listen to how much they gave. Verse 34. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as were owners of lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. You see what they're giving here? It's not just whatever's left in their income at the end of every month. They were selling their land. They were selling their houses. They were selling their property. They were selling the things that might have made them money in the future, that might have been given to their descendants in the future as an inheritance. They were selling it so that they could meet a need that was there right now. What if someone here decided to do that? What if they decided to sell off their property and their house and live with their parents or live with other people, or maybe buy a smaller house? Maybe they take this nice 3-story house and they go and they buy them a nice smaller house that they could comfortably live in. What would we say to them? How would we respond to that kind of radical love that they're trying to show toward God and toward other people? Would we say, oh, it's not wise for you to give so much? You shouldn't do that. Would we quench their spirit and their drive and their love that they're trying to show to other people? No, that's not the wise thing to do. Would we do that out of maybe envy and a desire to stop them from doing the thing that we wouldn't do? How would we feel toward that person? You see, these people are so convinced that Jesus has been resurrected from the dead, that they looked at their land and their houses that were so nice and so wonderful, and they said, this is nothing compared to the hope that we have given to us. Wow. And they trusted that Jesus would deliver that hope. That's why they were willing to give it all up. They didn't care about the things that were here anymore. They weren't living for this world anymore. They were living for the world that's to come. And they were willing to give everything to enjoy that world and to make God as pleased as he possibly could be because of the grace that he has shown toward them. You see, at the root of this, the root reason why they were willing to give so much is gratitude. Because the great grace that was upon them made it a joy to give these things up. I don't get the picture that they were wincing as they handed over the huge piles of money that they had received for their land, but that they went and they laid it at the apostles' feet. Please take it, please. Then we read of a couple of examples. Verse 36 says, thus Joseph, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, a Levite, a native of Cyprus, sold a field that belonged to him and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. We have an example of a man doing this very thing. Had a field, he sold it, and he laid it at the apostles' feet. And do you hear of Joseph much throughout the rest of the Bible? I mean, you hear of other Josephs, right? There's Joseph in the Old Testament. There's Joseph, the father of Jesus. But you don't hear of Joseph throughout the rest of the New Testament. You hear of a man named Barnabas. How amazing is it that the apostles would change his name? What kind of person do you have to be that the apostles would look at you and say, you're not going to be Joseph anymore. Your name is going to be Barnabas. Your name is going to be son of encouragement. What a wonderful time that would have been to live in, to experience. The grace of God was upon them, and they reacted to the grace of God with an outpouring of love, a love for God that was true, sincere, real, genuine, and a love for one another that said, what I have is not benefiting others, but I want it to. And I'm going to sell this and I'm going to give this money so that it can, so that there will not be a need for anyone. Wow. What's amazing whenever we are at a church service or around Christian people and we see those around us do some great act of faith, how sometimes we feel a little bit weird about that. Maybe we squash it and try to prevent it from happening, or maybe we try to emulate it. And as we go into chapter 5, I want you to just ignore the chapter break, okay? Horrible chapter break. Because this story continues with another group of people this time who bring money to lay at the apostles' feet after they have sold their land. And notice what happens there. It says, "But a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property, and with his wife's knowledge he kept back for himself some of the proceeds, and brought only a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, 'Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to man, but to God.' When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came upon all who heard of it. The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him. After an interval of about 3 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter said to her, 'Tell me, whether you sold the land for so much?' And he said, 'Yes, for so much.' But Peter said to her, 'How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out.' Immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. When the young men came in, they found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things." You know, whenever we think about the first century church, that picture in the first 4 chapters lingers, doesn't it? What a beautiful picture that is of perfection, it seems, like complete and utter devotion, giving everything to serve God because of the grace that was upon them, because of the understanding they have of all that Jesus has done for them. But it doesn't take long for men to mess it up. If you've been a part of a church for any length of time, I'm sure that you've experienced men messing it up. Men falling short of what God has really called them to be and living selfishly ambitious lives at the expense of the church, taking advantage of others. Well, it happened here. That one heart and one soul among all the over 5,000 people did not last forever, but there was a couple who was of a different mind. A couple who had decided in their hearts to try to deceive God, to try to take on that prominence of being someone who had given so much when in fact they had not. It's kind of odd as you read this story that you would see Ananias and Sapphira giving and yet being put to death. We might ask, why would that happen? Why would God kill them for this? I mean, if this were in our church and someone had sold a large amount of money, one of the church members had sold a large amount of land and had a lot of money, and they were bringing it before the church, wouldn't we be excited about that? I mean, that's a lot of money. We would say, "Oh, wow, that's awesome. I can't believe you were willing to give so much." But hey, listen, we know how much it really sold for. I mean, you're not deceiving God. So next time you give us the whole amount. Okay, a little pat on the back. Good job, though. Thank you. But that's not what happens here. Instead of thanking them, which is what we might have done, we see God taking their breath away. God allowing them to stop receiving grace, to stop receiving life. And what does this tell us? What does this tell the whole church? It tells us that God cares about our motivations. God cares about why it is that we're doing the good that we're doing. And He wants us to understand that though He is a very gracious and merciful God, abounding in steadfast love for thousands, He will by no means clear the guilty. Salvation means that Jesus has come to save us from the wrath that we deserve. That means that there is a day that's coming when there will be a judgment. That God is not just a fluffy teddy bear. He is more so a terrifying judge who will bring what is due to those who are evil. And if we turn again to evil, then we can expect judgment. He makes it very clear to the church of thousands of people who've been encouraged by so much that they also need to be aware that if they decide to be evil once again, they should be afraid. They should fear the wrath and the justice that God will bring upon those who appear righteous, but inwardly are wicked. It's called hypocrisy. It's called actors, fake Christians. And God made that statement very clear at the very beginning of the church. Well, what are we going to learn from all of this? I want you to notice the contrast between Joseph and Ananias. These two men were both willing to give a lot. And as we read these two stories together, we can see some very clear distinction in the motivation of each man. In Joseph, there was just a desire to give because he was grateful for all that God had done for him. And he didn't hold anything back. He gave it all and laid it all at the apostles' feet with joy, knowing of the hope that was waiting for him, knowing of the promises that had been fulfilled in Jesus. But when we look at Ananias, we see a man who wants the recognition, wants to be well thought of, but he also wants the money and to be well thought of by other people. He's trying to do both. He's trying to serve God and serve money. And so as we notice that this is what's going on and seeing this contrast that is very clearly laid out for us in the text, we're forced to ask ourselves, what are we holding back in our service to God? Are we appearing like we love Him and acting like we love Him while holding back what we really, honestly should be giving Him? Notice that if we don't have love in whatever it is that we're doing, whatever work, whatever service that we do, if we don't do it out of love, it's completely empty. We need to be thinking long and hard about what motivates us to do a good deed, to serve someone else around us, to give of our money, to give of our time. If we sell our house and we give the money, why are we going to do that? How much of it are we going to give? And why would we hold back any? Do we really have the right heart? Do we really have the right mindset in whatever work that we do? If the grace of God has impacted us, then we'll have a totally different motivation. Are we being motivated to come to church services because it's routine, because it's what we've always done? Do you understand? God's not pleased with that. Are we motivated to come and to do acts of service here because we want the pat on the back? We want everybody to love us and to see that we're really good people. God's not pleased with that. Do we serve because we don't want to go to hell? And because we want God to give us a bunch of stuff? That's not the reason why they were given. Sure, they had a hope in heaven that was waiting for them, and I'm sure they were excited about it. But it was about the grace that God had given to them. It was about a grateful heart. God is not pleased with us when we give to Him in any way other than out of love. If you're married, you probably know what this is like. If you've ever been in that relationship situation where your spouse does some good things for you, expecting you to do something in return, it doesn't quite have the same sweetness to it, does it? If a spouse cleans the house and they do the dishes and they cook you a nice meal and then they ask you to go cut the lawn and to go do this, do that, go shopping, take them on vacation, whatever it is. It doesn't have the same sweetness to it as the spouse that does all those things and says, I did this because I love you. I am so happy to be in a relationship with you. And I can't imagine having a relationship like this with anyone else. You see how that parallels with God? We can do all these good things and then just say, hey, God, where's my stuff? I expect heaven when this life's over, right? I'm going to give my career to you. I'm going to go and serve you and be a missionary out in another country. And I'm expecting you to give me a whole lot. But that's not really loving toward God, is it? You see how our minds have to be focused in on God's grace. So much so that it motivates us to do everything. I want you to take time throughout your day and think about the grace that God has given to you. Every prayer should be focused in primarily at the beginning on how gracious God has been to us. Thankful to Him for our families, thankful to Him for our church family, thankful for our jobs, thankful for our possessions, thankful for the opportunities that we have to give back. We're not just making money to keep it for ourselves, I hope. We're making money to give it to other people. And that should be our focus because we're thankful. So I want you to place a value on God's grace towards you. And then I want you to give. Whether it's your time, whether it's your land, whether it's your house, whether it's whatever it is. I want you to say, however valuable God's grace is to me, that's what I'm going to give to Him. That's what the church did. I'm not asking for money for myself. I'm asking that you be this kind of radical Christian who everybody looks at and says, it's not wise for you to give that much. I'm asking for you to be the son of encouragement, to be Barnabas, to be somebody who we rename. That's our Barnabas at this congregation. That's someone who gives everything and they expect nothing. But they give it because they love. Because they remember how much God has loved them. You remember 1 Corinthians 13? It says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I'm a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mystery and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount told us that when we give, we don't need to do it in front of other men to be seen by them, because if we do that, then we lose our reward. We need to be careful and think about why we give and what we're giving. Are we doing it out of love because of the grace that God has shown to us? If you're here this morning and you've not been giving to God as you should, you're probably not alone. I know you're not alone. I don't feel like I've been giving as I should. But why can't we change? Why can't we become like the church in the first century? Why can't we give more? We got a nice treasury that we're now using to support preachers who are preaching the gospel. Why can't we give more? Why can't we find more men to support? We can. There's plenty. All across the globe, there are men who need our support. Why can't we find those in need in our own congregation? If you have a need, let us know. We're here to help. We're here to serve. If you suffer because we don't know about your need, you're doing us a disservice. We want to help. We want to serve. We want to love you. And we may not make you rich or wealthy, but we want to help you and make your life much more comfortable, because some of us here are extremely comfortable in our lives, and we want to help you to live more comfortably as well. Imagine as we study this and we think about this, we think, well, what if someone takes advantage? Well, notice Ananias and Sapphira, God's going to give them what's due. I don't think anybody here would. I don't think the church was prospering like crazy because people were taking advantage. We need to understand and learn how to trust people. That's something I've struggled with. But if you're here tonight or today and you need the grace of God towards you, don't come because you want our money, but come because you want the grace, because you want to love God more. You want to come to know Him better. You want to be a part of the spiritual family that He's created for you. And it's not something that is really hard to enter into. It's something that requires a total transformation of your life, though. You can't love your money anymore. You can't love this world anymore. You have to love and serve others because you love God. And if there's anything that we can do to help you to make that step, will you please let us know? Please come as we stand and as we sing.